So picture this. You own your home, you own your driveway, but you're told your own family isn't allowed to park there. Sounds crazy, right? Well, this isn't some hypothetical. It's the true story of how a seemingly simple parking tiff spiraled into a full-on legal battle, and it tells us a ton about the real power a condo association can have. Let's dig in. Everything kicks off with this one simple and, you have to imagine, super frustrating statement from Dr. Kressel. I mean, just put yourself in his shoes for a second. It's your condo, it's your driveway, but suddenly there are rules about who in your family can use it. This is the exact conflict that lit the fuse. And that really brings us to the core question here, doesn't it? When you buy a place in a community, like a condo complex, how much of that property is truly under your control? Is that driveway really yours to do with as you please? Well, we're about to find out.
Okay, so to understand how this all happened, we have to look at the rule book. The whole case, literally the entire thing, hangs on how the condo association defined two little words, guest and resident. Let's break down what they actually mean.
Here's a quick look at how it all went down. Dr. Kressel buys his condo back in 2002. Then, 2 years later, and this is super important, the board brings in these new parking rules. Fast forward to 2007, his sister moves in, and bam, they're immediately in conflict with the new rules. The association gives them a little breathing room, a temporary pass, but they draw a line in the sand. September 1st, it's over. The clock is officially ticking. And this right here is the rule that caused the whole mess. You can see how they drew the lines. A resident is one thing, a guest is something else entirely, and they have totally different parking privileges. A resident parks in the driveway, a guest uses guest parking. The most important thing to see here is that there's no gray area. You're either one or the other. And that little distinction, it's going to decide the entire case. So, the million-dollar question, what was Dr. Kressel's sister? A resident or a guest? Well, his own words pretty much sealed the deal. When he said she resides with him and can stay as long as she wants, well, according to the association's own rulebook, that makes her a resident. Case closed on that front. So, with those definitions locked in, this thing goes from a neighborhood dispute to a full-blown court case. Both sides geared up with their arguments. Let's look at exactly what each of them claimed. All right, so Dr. Kressel's first big argument was all about procedure. He basically said, hey, these new parking rules aren't just little tweaks, they're a massive change, practically an amendment to the community's constitution. And he argued something that big should have been put to a vote for all the homeowners, not just decided by the board. His second point was about fairness. He argued these rules were just flat out unreasonable and they singled him out. He even brought up a future scenario saying, look, if I ever get married, this one car per resident rule would literally force me to sell my home and move out. But the association came back swinging, and they used the community's own founding document, the Declaration, to do it. They pointed the judge right to Section 6.3, which pretty clearly states that the board has the power to create and change rules for, well, any area, including a homeowner's driveway. So their counter-argument was pretty simple and, you gotta admit, pretty strong. They basically said, Your Honor, this wasn't some illegal amendment. This was just the board using the exact power you can see written down in Section 6.3. We were just doing our job. Okay, so we've heard both sides. We have the arguments, we have the defense, so let's get to the judge's final decision. But here's the thing. It turns out the case didn't just come down to those arguments. A critical piece of information came to light that pretty much changed everything. I mean, think about it. You've got two sides fighting over whether the rules are fair or legal. But what if there was another way? A way to work within the system that maybe got overlooked? What if there was another door Dr. Kressel could have knocked on first? And here it is, the big twist. It turns out, buried deep in that same declaration everyone was arguing about was Section 425. It was a variance clause, which is basically a formal process for a homeowner to ask for a special exception to the rules. An official escape hatch was there the whole time. Now this is a total game changer. Not only did this process exist, but get this, the association's own president had used it to get permission for a second car. So it clearly worked. And the absolute kicker? Dr. Kressel never even tried. He never once filled out the paperwork to formally apply for that exception. With that new information on the table, the judge's logic became really clear. It was a simple three-step takedown. 1. the sister is a resident. Fact. 2, the board had the authority to make the rules. Fact. And 3, the knockout blow. Dr. Kressel couldn't possibly prove the rules were unreasonable because he never even bothered to use the official process that was designed to handle situations just like his. And that was that. The judge's final order came down. Petition dismissed. The condominium association won. The rules stood, and after all that, his sister still couldn't park in his driveway. So this parking problem turned into a really important legal lesson. But what's in it for the rest of us? Let's break down the key takeaways for anyone who lives in a place with a homeowners association or similar rules. The lessons here are so important. First things first, actually read the governing documents. Not when you're already in trouble, but before you even have a problem. Next, you have to understand that the board's power to make rules is real. But maybe the biggest lesson from this whole story is to learn the entire system. Before you decide to go to war over a rule, you have to make sure you've used every single option available to you within those rules, like applying for that all-important variance. And this whole story leaves us with a much bigger question to think about, right? Dr. Kressel just wanted the individual freedom to use his own driveway. The community wanted collective rules to keep things orderly and fair for everyone. So when we all decide to live together in a shared space, how do we find that perfect balance between the rules we need for the group and the freedom we all want for ourselves?